What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today I'm going to be sharing my top 10 tips to help you guys win more Gulag matches while playing Warzone. These 1v1s are extremely important to be winning fairly consistently, especially as a solo player because that's your last shot of getting back into the match, but even in squad matches, it can really make a big difference for your team because if you lose that Gulag match, that's $4,500 that your teammates have to shell out that could have been spent on something much more valuable for the team. So with the tips that I'm going to be sharing with you guys today, this should help you win these matches at least a little bit more effectively. I'm not going to be that guy that claims that you'll never lose a Gulag match again after watching these tips. These are just designed to help you be at least a little bit more consistent. So let's get into the first thing, and the first thing I wanted to talk about was more of a general bigger picture sort of a thing. When it comes to these Gulag matches, there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. And each approach you take will depend on the gun that you've got, as well as your confidence with that gun. Having said that, I did want to share a few of the different types of approaches that I find to be generally pretty successful within the Gulag, but again, you have to kind of adapt to the situation as well as your own personal strengths. The first approach that I really like that often just takes people completely off guard is a straight up rush. Just pure aggression, get to your enemy as fast as possible and get shots on them as fast as possible. A lot of people quite simply don't expect this at all. They expect you to be a lot more slow and tactical, and therefore they just don't expect to run into you so soon. And if you manage to take them off guard in this situation, you're usually getting your first shot or two on target before they even realize what's happening. Now, of course, that doesn't work all the time, but that's one approach that I will like to take, especially if I'm feeling really warmed up and confident with my aim and everything. I'll just go for that pure aggression route. However, if I'm not really feeling in the zone or it's a gun that I'm not particularly comfortable with that I ended up getting, the other approach that I find to be pretty consistent is to push up on one of the sides of the map and push up to somewhat mid-map area, and then from there, basically just wait and watch your lanes and see how the situation unfolds. If you get a really aggressive enemy, oftentimes they'll run right into your sights at this point, and then you should have the advantage against that player most of the time. And then if you get a really defensive player on the other team, after you wait and pause for a little bit to see if they happen to rush, if they don't, then this is where you typically start implementing the equipment into things. So you could try and do like a stun check on their spawn, so you just throw a stun towards their spawn to see if you get a hit marker, and then if you do, obviously you want to capitalize on that and push them immediately. If you don't, then at least that gives you some more information on where they aren't, and then you can seek them out and try and get the kill on them. I really like this approach as a more balanced approach where you're not way too aggressive or way too defensive. It's just a nice balance, and it tends to open up a lot of different opportunities for you to adapt to the situation. The one approach that I would recommend staying away from is waiting back in your spawn and letting the enemy come to you. The reason you typically don't want to do this is it gives the enemy player full map control, so they'll control the entire middle of the map, and the only area of the map you have control over is your spawn area. Then, when the stuns and the flashes become activated, you're screwed, because it's so easy to hit somebody that's standing back in their spawn with either a stun or a flash, and once you get hit by one of those, it's basically over for you. But that pretty much covers it for the first tip that I have. That one is a much more general, bigger picture thing, and I wanted to talk about that one in a bit more detail than some of the other ones in today's video. The next one is one that I have shared before in a previous tip video, but it definitely applies to the Gulag here, and I think it's kind of funny more than anything. This is when you're waiting to get into your Gulag match and you're running around and most people are just throwing rocks or punching each other. You can spray paint enemy players with bright colors like red or yellow, and that will carry into your Gulag match, which will make them stand out so much more. Sometimes you can get those situations where they kind of blend in with the background, or it's just kind of a dark sort of an area, and it maybe takes you even just a few extra milliseconds to recognize that that's an enemy player on your screen because they're blending in. When you spray paint them a bright color, you don't have that problem at all. You will instantly recognize that that's the enemy player, and that might give you a slight advantage sometimes. Now, of course, this tip isn't the type of thing that basically like guarantees you a win, and a lot of times it won't even really make a difference at all. I just find it to be quite interesting, and it definitely can help you in some specific situations. Next up, something that you can do during the countdown before your 1v1 is, during this time, you can see the red outline of the enemy player, and they can see a red outline of you. So what you can do is turn your character model all the way to the right, for instance, which if that person is paying attention, they might see you do that and they'll think, okay, this guy's definitely going to my left, they're right. So then that's what they're expecting going into the match, and then of course, you don't go right when the match starts, you go to the left, and just try and fake them out that way. So that's a great tip that can often work against those people that are really paying attention to that kind of thing, although I would say there's probably a ton of players that don't even really notice or care about that red outline, so obviously it wouldn't work against them. But on the flip side of that, it is something that you should pay attention to as well, because not a lot of players will actively try to fake people out like this. Most players will actually telegraph what they're about to do in that match by looking to the right, for instance, and then actually going to the right when the match starts. So use that information, but don't rely on it too heavily because somebody might be trying to fake you out. Next up, something that I'm actually really bad at and I need to pay more attention to is during that countdown before your match actually starts, the game will show you your full loadout that you get. And most of the time, all I do is look to see what gun I've got. I don't pay attention to the equipment that the game is giving me. And this has screwed me over so many times where I go to stun an enemy and instead I throw a smoke grenade. And then I'm playing that situation as if I had just thrown a stun. And then I realize, oh crap, that's a smoke grenade. I've already got myself in this bad situation and it gets me killed. So this is definitely an area where I'm trying to be a bit more aware of that, and I encourage you guys to do the same. Don't just look at your gun, also look at your equipment. Next up, getting into a couple tips that apply to the actual gunfights themselves once you've actually started engaging the enemy. The first thing is headshots can often make the difference between life and death, especially when you've got the 357 or the Desert Eagle. If you've got these two pistols, they are a one-shot kill to the head, and therefore it's often in your best interest to try and land that headshot. Keep your sights up at headshot level when you're expecting to run into an enemy, and if the situation allows for it, try to hit them in the head. Having said that though, don't get too hung up on going for headshots if the enemy's got really good movement, if they're strafing a lot for instance. Sometimes in those situations, you're just better off going for those two quick body shots rather than trying to line up that perfect headshot. Going off of that tip, another big thing that will help you win gunfights more often is make sure that you're always moving, strafe back and forth, jump shot, drop shot, do something to try and be a really difficult target to shoot. And this might seem like absolute common sense for most players out there, and yet I'm still running into a ton of people that basically just stand still and try and shoot back at me. And it's just so easy to pick off a headshot or just spam a bunch of bullets at them while dodging all of their bullets. Moving on to the next tip that I've got for you guys, this is, remember that a melee hit with a gun in your hand will deal 90 damage to the enemy player. So it won't be a one-hit kill, but if you put even just a little bit of damage, if you have like the M19 for instance, and you shoot the enemy once, all it takes is one melee hit to finish them off at that point. So if you find yourself in a point-blank situation, and you've already put a little bit of damage into the enemy player, just melee them. Don't bother trying to spam out a bunch of other shots. I find this especially applies when using the 357 because people tend to have really bad aim with the 357 because it doesn't fire immediately when you pull the trigger. There's a little bit of a delay there, so people often miss their shots. If you catch somebody on a reload, just sprint up to them and melee them to death. You will often take them off guard. You'll have so much pressure put on them, they won't know how to handle that situation. Now, that one typically just applies to the pistols. It doesn't apply so much for the shotguns. But this next tip that I have for you guys is especially useful for shotguns, and this is slide with shotguns as much as possible. This is by far the best way of avoiding shots from enemy players. Strafing usually won't save you. Jump shotting won't save you from shotguns because they'll already have their sights up. But oftentimes sliding, that's what's going to throw off a shotgun user. And therefore, anytime it's a shotgun round, you'll see me sliding every single corner I go around. I'll just be constantly sliding around the Gulag. And this allows me to dodge so many shots, or at least dodge a lot of pellets, and therefore force the enemy to have to take a second shot when they otherwise would have been able to kill me in just one shot. Now, we're almost getting to the end of the list here. The next tip that I've got for you guys is sometimes it can be in your best interest to kind of pay attention to where all the rocks are being thrown while you're playing a match. Typically, people will try to throw rocks directly at the players that are currently fighting within the Gulag, and therefore, if you're looking around and you just can't find where the enemy player is hiding and they're probably sitting in a corner somewhere, if you happen to notice a bunch of rocks being thrown into one concentrated area, it's very likely that's where the enemy player is going to be. Now, this is something that you shouldn't rely on, and you shouldn't put too much of your focus or your energy trying to pay attention to. The reason for this is sometimes people just throw their rocks randomly. I do this sometimes. I'm not throwing it at anyone in particular. I'm just throwing them because I've got them. And therefore, sometimes it's misleading. And then other times, that just forces you to take your attention away from the actual potential fight. And if you're looking up and you're looking around trying to find out where these rocks are coming from and where they're going, that can definitely make you react slower if the enemy decides to push you. But finally, one last tip I wanted to share with you guys that a lot of people are still confused about. I was confused about this at first. In the Gulag, health does regenerate. And this regeneration is automatic over time, just like you would expect to see within multiplayer or within Warzone. At first, I thought it only regenerated when you touched the flag once the flag appeared, because in several examples that I looked at, I guess I just happened to have that timing just perfect where my health automatically started regenerating just as I touched that middle flag. It turns out the flag has nothing to do with it at all. Your health will auto-regen no matter what. But a big key here is if you take any source of damage while you're waiting for your health to regenerate, it will reset that timer on your health regeneration. This includes being hit by a rock from one of the spectators, because those rocks will deal 1 damage to you. So you definitely don't want to get hit by one of those rocks if you're trying to regenerate your health. And therefore, don't stand still if you're waiting for your health to regenerate. Try and strafe around, strafe in a bit of a circular maneuver as well. That way it doesn't really matter what angle they have, it's going to be pretty difficult for them to hit you with a rock. And that can definitely save your life if you're trying to regenerate health throughout a Gulag match. But with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's video. I think I threw an extra tip or 2 in there, a little bit more than 10, but hey, 10 sounds nicer. It's a nice even round number, so we're going to leave it at that. Of course, though, I'd like to know in the comment section below, what other tips would you have to help win in the Gulag within Warzone? If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.